Nick Saban goes on a rant, stunner. Typically does this about 10 to 3 days out of the opener, whether it's rat poison or whatever. And he'll do the same thing. Wait and see. It'll be mid-October. That's what he does. I'm not saying it's good or bad because you can't argue with his success. However, his latest rant could actually affect Josh Heupel. So let's talk about this. He attacks the media for wanting a depth chart, says it creates a distraction. This is the quote. I know your number one focus is not on the game, it's on the depth chart. Look, there's a lot of competition on the team. When we put a depth chart out, you all think it's like final, like it's etched in stone, and it's going to be way forevermore just because we come out of fall camp and that's where it is. Creates a lot of distractions on our team, creates a lot of guys thinking, well, this guy won the job now, and I'm not going to play or whatever. And quite frankly, we don't need that. Well, that's a bunch of bull. That's a bunch
Say
of
it the
bull.
way Nick Saban would say it, though. You said it very nicely.
Yeah, I don't know that I can do a Saban impression. I'll work on that, but I that's a bunch of bull. Guys know who's going to play more, who's going to start, who has the edge. Telling the media that is absolutely non-consequential to what happens within the locker room and on that football team. Has no effect whatsoever. And I'll tell you this: if Nick Saban wants to go off on the media, it's not for the sake of he's frustrated by the media. He is telling his players with this quote, if you're not first string on the opening depth chart, then don't worry. You can end up winning a job later or a starting job later down the line. Now, how does this affect Tennessee? Well, how it affects Tennessee because of this, and Caleb, I want to get to is his shtick getting old, Nick Saban, but Josh Heupel, in a different sort of way, wants to control the media and put out fake depth charts of Cooper Mays starting and that sort of thing. And I get it. Okay. I understand doing that. But at some point, and we talked about the Big Ten doing this with an injury report and a depth chart, the rules of college sports are going to tighten on these coaches. Nick Saban's old school. Josh Heupel will adapt. But if you start getting to the point where you have to list somebody as questionable and doubtful, and you could potentially get fined, so this isn't out of the realm of possibility. If you don't adhere to the rules, then it's going to affect how Josh Heupel puts out depth charts and deals with the media. Because listen, there's no way that Cooper Mays is starting on Saturday, but he's listed as a starter. So this would have an effect on Josh Heupel, no question about it.
Absolutely, it would. I thought about this yesterday, Dave, and I want to know what your thoughts are with the depth chart, and I want to know if this has changed things a little bit. I somewhat agree that players know if they're going to start or not, but sometimes I think coaches keep things close to the vest and don't tell their players their plans like in the game. I don't think CJ Leak knew he was going to get pulled for James Banks after 2 series at Georgia in 2002.
Okay, that's a good example. There are some times that you are hiding things from your players, but I think you would agree that's about 1 in 100.
Well, my question that what I was going to ask you is, do you think that's more common now and coaches are more vague with their players because of the transfer portal? And so they don't want their players to think they've lost a starting job because then they'll go ahead and hit the transfer portal and they want that player for depth.
I'm going to say no because I think that you can transfer and play right away. So I mean, listen, if you were to lose your starting job and you're a Tennessee football player or a player anywhere, you could still go somewhere else. Are you going to mail it in the rest of the season? Well, I hope you have a little bit more personal integrity than to do that. So how would it affect Caleb? I guess I'm not really following you. How
Do
would
you
it
think they
affect?
don't? Do you think the player that they don't want to lose at the end of the season, though? Do you think Josh Heupel's thinking, this player is going to be a backup for me for a couple of years, but I want him to start by his junior year, but he wants to start now, and he's going to look somewhere else at the end of the year, and I don't want to lose him. Do you think Josh Heupel's thinking that in his mind?
Well, what Josh Heupel has to do is he has to build a program like Saban's that proves that they can send players to the NFL on a consistent basis, like Alabama has done. So once you do that, then you will quickly find that those players don't transfer nearly as easily. Okay. So when that happens, then you don't really care. And listen, if your player X and player Y plays the same position as you, and he started more games and he's played more in the fourth quarter when it really counts, then you need to realize that if that guy's not gone the next year, nothing's going to change unless he gets hurt. So if you want to transfer. But I look at Jacob Warren and Princeton Fant, and I'm not saying this because we do the Vol Report with Jake Warren, brought to you by Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn. LASIK, cataract, and their local vision centers are fantastic for your regular checkups. Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn brings you the Vol Report with Jacob Warren. I'm not just saying this because Jacob Warren is a part of what we do, but he had every bit the impact that Princeton Fant had last year. Now, Princeton Fant lined up at fullback, and he had the one neat play. I think it was like an end around play, and he had the sexier plays. But it might surprise a lot of people. Jacob Warren played 75% of the snaps. Now, that was they rotate in and out every drive. That was kind of happenstance and coincidental. But Jacob Warren had every bit the effect of Princeton Fant, and he knows that. That's why he came back. He wasn't worried about Ethan Davis taking his job or some transfer taking his job. He knew that. Now, if he thought that wasn't the case, he's probably in the NFL right now.
Yeah, no, that I understand that. And I think a lot of players understand that a depth chart is not what it used to be. So I just wonder if the transfer portal is kind of a factor. Now, I will say you're right. If anybody shouldn't do this, it's Nick Saban. Because so Nick Saban is lying through his teeth because nobody has the credibility Nick Saban has to say who's starting and who's not, and players will still buy in. I think that. Do you think so? I wonder if this is a meticulous move by Nick Saban, like what you brought up at the beginning, to say basically to make sure his players understand that if they're not starting, that everything's going to be okay. Because I've always wondered if Nick Saban's rants are meticulous. It's not like, okay, we talked about Butch Jones's rant yesterday with the Shy Tuttle fell on a helmet moment when he said, "What do we want out of our media?" That was Butch Jones being thin-skinned and melting down and panicking in the moment, wasn't it? Yes. That wasn't meticulous for his players at all.
It's a big difference between melting down and being having something that's orchestrated and having a goal in mind. No doubt.
Right. And so I think Nick Saban has a goal in mind. I feel like a lot of the times he lashes out at the media is to kind of get his players refocused. The only time I think Nick Saban ever melted down in the media was the DJ Fluker incident in 2013, and he got mad about being questioned about that a lot ahead of the Texas A&M game.
Okay, so let me tell you what this was. This was a clear declaration to Jalen Milroe, Ty Simpson, Tyler Buchner, and Dylan Lonergan, who's not going to start. But it was a clear declaration that, hey, dudes, if you don't start the first game, this quarterback situation is very unsettled, which should make the rest of the SEC feel very good when they have to play Alabama. And just because guy X starts the season doesn't mean that he's going to start even the second game. That's what this was. I think it's clear as day. This was through the media. He was telling the quarterbacks to keep practicing as hard as you have, because I don't think there's a clear-cut leader. I think that's what it was, 110%. Now, the question I have for you is, should Josh Heupel have handled it that way? With Nico and Joe Milton, should he have continued to push those guys and say, well, I'm not really sure who's going to start. Nico has a lot of talent. Joe Milton has some more experience. Should we be going into the opener with uncertainty who starts at quarterback? Because, listen, I think at the end of the day, Nico is going to be in 3 years. He's going to have a better career than Joe Milton and be a better quarterback. I don't know that he is right now. And as a matter of fact, I don't think he is. But should he have played that up, either via the media or whatever, not named a starter to continue to make those guys push and play hard? Would that have been a wise or stupid decision?
I cannot believe I never thought about that. Good job, Dave. Yeah, you're right. This is a sign that he doesn't have a quarterback. And so he wants all his quarterbacks competing hard because he doesn't know who's good enough to play yet. And none of them look good enough. I don't think that's the case with Josh Heupel. And I think the reason with Joe Milton. Look, Joe Milton has admitted he struggled with confidence already. He's kind of admitted that. I think with Joe Milton, the team has rallied around him. Silver team chemistry and Milton's own confidence. I think it helps him for you to come out and say, Milton's my guy. Similar to how Dave, you've talked a lot about like how everything Jonathan Crompton went through at Tennessee. But the reason he had that second half resurgence in 2009, look, give Lane Kiffin credit. Kiffin stuck his neck out for Crompton the whole time and said, I don't care what happens. Crompton is my guy, period, end of story. And it helped. I think of something like Peyton Manning with the Colts his rookie year. We talk about how mentally tough Peyton Manning was to absorb, to play so badly and learn from it and not melt down. But don't you think part of that was the Colts showing so much confidence in Peyton and saying, we don't care how bad he is, he's our quarterback for the future no matter what?
Yes.
And that he knew he had that backing?
Yes, and I want to pull up Elias's comment. He said, I think the current dynamic is healthier rather than BSing your quarterbacks. I completely agree with you. So, Caleb, I ask you the question, and we got a little sidetracked, but I don't think this is the same situation. I think if you came out and said this is an open quarterback competition in January, because you're right. You had Lane Kiffin say, no question, Jonathan Crompton is the starter. And everybody said, that's crazy. Open it up. Let somebody else get a shot. And they didn't do that. And this is a similar situation. Joe Milton, I believe, is confident, but are there cracks in that confidence because of what happened in the Ole Miss game and losing your job? There should be. I mean, if you're a competitor that fails in competition, then yeah, it's going to affect your confidence a little bit. So I think this is a completely different situation. I would not have played it up a quarterback competition at all. Caleb, would you have even considered that given the dynamic that's going on right now in Tennessee?
Not at all. Not at all. Because you knew what Joe Milton could do, and it turned out he could do it because he showed it throughout practice, spring and fall camp. And the team, this is his team. Everything I've heard from reports is the team is behind Joe Milton as their quarterback. So I think that's a big deal. Saban, it's different because Saban, I will say, you're in a rock and a hard place with Alabama. This is basically, I don't have a quarterback, but you can't say there's open competition if there isn't, because then everybody's going to run with the fact that you don't have a quarterback. Everybody would run with that immediately. But if you name a starter, you're worried that your other quarterbacks won't go all out to try to take their reps as seriously. I've seen that. Dave, I'll be honest, you've covered practices more than I do, but I know this happens. How often when a player realizes he's a backup does he not take his reps seriously in practice? And then then an injury happens, he's thrown into the starting lineup and he's not ready to go because he didn't take his second team reps as seriously.